For those of you who are new on campus today, welcome. On behalf of our faculty and our staff, we're delighted that you're here. This Dallas Seminary boat has been in the water going on 85 years. Those of us who have had the privilege of serving in leadership have been water skiing behind the wake of a great heritage and a great history of God's work throughout these years. In our close to 85 years of history, there have only been 5 of us who have served in the role of president because of 2 very long-term presidencies, our founder, Dr. Louis Sperry Chafer, and then our beloved Dr. John Walvard, who served as president up until about 1986. That baton got passed to Dr. Donald K. Campbell, whom you will meet tomorrow, and we will honor him in his role with us as President Emeritus. And that baton then was transferred to Dr. Charles Swindoll. He is affectionately known as Chuck, and he has served on our seminary board for a number of years prior to being tapped to be our 4th president. He served for a number of years until 2001, when he, with a broad smile, said, "It's all yours." And I can't tell you how much the personal friendship and encouragement has meant to me over these years, from before we worked together while he was on the board to while we worked together when he was president, and now in his present role from a Dallas Seminary perspective, he is our chancellor. And he continues to write for us in our publications, to speak for us a couple times a semester in our chapels, and occasionally in public settings, he steps up the plate and hits the ball out of the park for us on behalf of the Lord's work here at DTS. He is married to his wife, Cynthia. They together have launched a ministry a number of years ago, well, about 25 years ago now, called Insight for Living. It's a radio publication ministry tool, encouragement conference style ministry. I'm sure you're all aware of that. But having come to Texas to be the president at Dallas Seminary, he decided to plant a church. And so Stonebriar Community Church was launched just about 10 years ago in Frisco, Texas. If you get on the tollway and go north, when it stops, you're there. And they are getting ready to open a brand new auditorium this fall. Within the next couple of weeks, it will be dedicated on the weekend that our board meets here, and we dedicate our new building over here, Washington Hall. We will be celebrating that weekend on a couple of fronts, and we're looking forward to being a part of that. As you know, he's a pastor, he's an author, he's a speaker, he's an encourager, he's a challenger. And this morning will be no different. Would you join me in welcoming our chancellor, Dr. Charles Swindoll?
Good morning. I add my voice to the many who have already welcomed you first year incoming students to the school, and I welcome you to one of the most dangerous places on the planet as you come to Dallas Seminary, and I mean that with my whole heart. It is here you will experience an attack like you've never known before. It is here the invisible and insidious presence of the enemy will take you on as a personal project. It is here you will know discouragement as you have never known before. You will be, before you have finished your years, disillusioned, wondering if you should really stay and finish the course you began. How's this for encouragement, huh? Many of you are greatly gifted, but this is not the time for those gifts to be best demonstrated. That will come later. You're like the NFL football players who are now in preseason. The thing they fear the most is what will sideline them for the rest of their career, and that would be a disastrous injury that would finish them off. Some of them have already been injured and won't start the season. Others are still waiting for the final word from the physician as to whether they can play through the season. You are in a 2, 3, 4 year preseason period of your life. And just as those in the athletic ranks really hate the years that are a part of preseason training, you will find yourself at times hating what you're going through, but it's all essential. It's all necessary. It's an all-important part of your preparing for a season of ministry that you cannot right now even imagine. You dream of it, but you can't know for sure where you will be or how God will use you. He's full of surprises, you know. And while the enemy is here, far more importantly, the Spirit of God is at work in and among us at this school. And greater is He who is in us than he who is in the world. And you will remember that over and over again when you go through these times of disillusionment and discouragement and perhaps even disease or maybe death in someone in your family. A good word to remember is Job's word, which he penned while his body was covered with boils, having just buried all of his children and enduring the presence of men who didn't know what they were talking about, who took the opportunity to preach to him rather than comfort him. Job wrote, "He knows the way that I take. When he has tried me, I will come forth as gold. My foot has held his steps. His way have I kept and not declined. Neither have I gone back from the command of his lips." And I love this next line. "I have esteemed the words of his mouth more than my necessary food." My hope for you during this preseason, dangerous time in your life is that you will absorb the truth. Though you will grow weary in well-doing, my prayer for you is that you will not lose your way. So easy to do that when discouraged, facing financial barriers you've never even known before, or perhaps marital conflicts, or academic struggles that have not been your experience before. For this is not merely academia. This is a spiritual warfare that you've entered into. Lingering students who remain and continue on in their studies could tell you, if you asked them, they could tell you of the trials. These faculty members bear the marks of memory of students they have trained and watched fall by the wayside. My hope is that will not be you. But understand now that you are a marked person. In the university years, you could hide out, but here you can't hide out. Here, the enemy knows exactly where you are and does not want your gifts to be exercised. My favorite cartoonist, Larson, now retired, which has always amazed me that a cartoonist needs to retire, left us all laughing with his Far Side little statements. And one of my favorites, faculty's heard me tell this from one semester to the next. Two deer are standing in a clearing in the woods. One of them has a massive target on his side, big bullseye. The other one looks at him, the one with the target, sprouting antlers and feeling sort of sparky for the new season. His friend says to him, "Bummer of a birthmark, Ralph." You walk around with a target on your chest. Every one of you. You will live with that for the rest of your ministry, including these years of training. And because that's true, I'm here not only to warn you, but I hope in a brief period of time to help equip you for the days ahead. It was Eugene Peterson who wrote in a great book called A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. Our attention spans have been conditioned by 30-second commercials. Our sense of reality has been flattened by 30-page abridgments. It is not difficult in such a world to get a person interested in the message of the gospel. It is terrifically difficult, however, to sustain the interest. Millions of people in our culture make decisions for Christ, but there is a dreadful attrition rate. In our kind of culture, anything, even news about God, can be sold if it is packaged freshly. But when it loses its novelty, it goes on the garbage heap. There is a great market for religious experience in our world. There is little enthusiasm for the patient acquisition of virtue. Little inclination to sign up for a long apprenticeship in what earlier generations of Christians called holiness. The best equipment you can wear for these years of training and ultimately for your decades of ministry is a life of holiness. I know. When you hear the word, it sounds a little spooky, even scary, sort of mysterious. John White, in his book, The Fight, tells of the things that flashed through his mind when he thought of holiness, and he listed them with tongue in cheek. Thinness, hollow-eyed gauntness, beards, sandals, long robes, stone cells, no sex, no jokes, hair shirts, frequent cold showers, fastings, hours and hours of prayer, wild, rocky deserts, getting up at 4 a.m., stained glass, self-humiliation. Wrong. That isn't holiness. Not necessarily. I like Chuck Colson's simple statement. Holiness is the everyday business of every Christian. It evidences itself in the decisions we make and the things we do hour by hour, day by day. Holiness is being set apart unto God and separating oneself from all that is unclean. Simple as that, but as profound as that. It was holiness that launched Isaiah into a life of ministry that he would never have expected. He tells of it in the 6th chapter of the prophecy of Isaiah, to which I would like to have you turn. And in this chapter, we have 8 verses that awaken us to a scene none of us has ever experienced. Isaiah, what a man. He has lived through a few of the final years of Hezekiah as the king. He would live to know Jotham as a king and all the way through to Manasseh before his death. However, not yet in what we would call ministry. This is the year we read in verse 1 that the king has died, or the king died. We don't know if Isaiah 6 is written at the very time of, shortly after, or the time of dying in Hezekiah's life. We only read in the year King Uzziah's death. So it's the year he died. Maybe the two of them had become close. Perhaps it was in realization that he was losing a friend in Uzziah that Isaiah found himself in the temple. And while he is there, 4 things occur. First, please observe, he saw the Lord. Verse 1, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, lofty, exalted, with the train of his robe filling the temple. It's a remarkable scene. Somehow, in a supernatural moment of time, Isaiah is given entrance into the presence of the throne room, and he witnesses the one he knows, but hasn't yet received that commission, that calling for ministry. He sees him exalted, enthroned, seated. And while standing with his mouth opened, we read that there were seraphim who stood above him. Seraphim it's a category of angels mentioned only here in the scriptures, here in this verse and in verse 6, never anywhere else. From saraph, to burn. The plural ending tells us that there were many of them, several of them. I'm not the first to point out that they no doubt were standing on either side in antiphonal voice, sounding forth their praise. Verse 2, they stood above him, each having 6 wings. With 2, he covered his face. With 2, he covered his feet. And with 2, he flew. I'll give you the willies. Here are these creatures with 6 wings filling the throne room of the king. And what are they doing? They are calling out to one another. And they are announcing one of the magnificent attributes of the one they adore. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God of hosts. The earth is full of his glory. I take it that they are sounding back and forth to one another. In choir work, this is called singing in an antiphonal manner. So let's do that. Let's divide this chapel right down the middle and let me have you join in. Imagine yourself without wings, but with the role of a seraph, and you are sounding forth, holy, holy, holy. We'll do it separately later, but let's do it together now. Together? Holy, holy, holy. You can do better than that. Here we go again. Holy, holy, holy. Now we'll do this side first. You do it 3 times. Then we'll go over here and you do it, say it 3 times. We'll go back and forth. My time will be up about 11:25, so you can. It's a great way to fill the time, huh? Halfway. Here we go. Holy, 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 holy. Again. Holy, holy, holy. Louder. Holy, holy, holy. Louder. Holy, 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 holy. That is what Isaiah heard. He saw the Lord high and lifted up, and he heard sounds he had never heard, certainly from the voices of angelic creatures. And they announced that their Lord had glory that filled the whole earth. Now imagine you're alone, you're in the temple, perhaps suffering through grief or the fear of the death of a loved one, or perhaps following that death. You're vulnerable, you're troubled, and you appear before him who is holy. And we read what happened as a result of that sound. The foundations of the threshold trembled at the voice of him who called out. This is a term that it's used in chapter 7, if I'm not mistaken, verse 2, when it was reported to the house of David, saying, the Arameans have camped in Ephraim. His heart and the hearts of his people shook as the trees of the field, the forest, shake with the wind. Same word. This is a shaking of the foundations, the stone foundations of the temple. And Isaiah, standing there, realizes it's not unlike an earthquake. And he hears this sound and he feels the trembling. God's getting through to him in ways he's never known before. And the temple is filled with smoke. As if the voices and the trembling isn't enough, there is now a smoke-filled sacred room where Isaiah is clouded with this heavenly presence. Not only does he see the Lord, we read that he's touched by the Lord. Look at verse 5. He said, woe is me, I am ruined. What an interesting response. It reminds me of the 51st Psalm where David writes of a broken and contrite heart which God does not despise. Not self-humiliation, but true humility. A brokenness, a bruising, a realization of one's own sinfulness. How helpful is that in our being equipped for ministry? Never to forget that we are mere human beings. Spurgeon said that on one occasion. He spoke of how we are mere men, as he put it. Mere men, frail, feeble, and apt to faint. That's what Isaiah is realizing. Here I am in the midst of this smoke and the trembling and the sound of the seraphim. And who am I to be in the presence of such a one? I'm ruined. I'm finished, we would say. Curtains for me. Luther renders this, I am dissolved. The Hebrew word means to cease, to cause to cease. Everything stops here. That's it for me. You will feel that so many times in your preseason years at Dallas Seminary. For whatever the reason, and I won't take the time to enumerate them or to describe them, but you will feel finished. That's it. You will entertain thoughts of quitting more than you ever dream right now. That's the way the enemy works, you know. You will realize that how unqualified you are. Or I hope you will realize it. You'll go through the transition of it's being all about you, as it may have been through much of your life, to realizing it is not at all about you. No one cares that much about you. God wants his spokesmen and women to be voices that he can use, but it's never about the voice. It's about his presence, his message. I'm ruined. He even identifies it, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I run with people like that. Maybe it takes it too far for some of you, but I take it literally. I think he struggled with profanity. I think there were times in a temper moment when he burst out and said words that he was ashamed of. Who hasn't done that? And I take it from what this says that it is a major concern and perhaps a cause for him to say, I'm not the one. I'm not worthy to be here. I'm a man of unclean lips. It could mean he was given to flattery or lying or exaggeration or lack of tact and compassion. We don't know what it refers to, but the Living Bible puts it this way: my doom is sealed. I'm a foul-mouthed sinner, a member of a sinful, foul-mouthed race. It's about as close as you can get to the original idea of I'm ruined. So the Lord touches him. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a burning coal in his hand, which he had taken from the altar with tongs. Now watch closely. He touched my mouth. I think there's significance in where the coal was placed. The very place of his struggle. He just said, I'm a man of unclean lips. That coal is placed right on his lips. It's a great thought, isn't it? The Lord touches us in the place of our greatest struggle. How good of him to do that. There isn't a rebuke. There isn't shame. There isn't a long sermon delivered how he needs to clean up his mouth. He knew all of that. But this burning coal from that same throne scene is now touching his lips. So he has seen the Lord. He is now touched by the Lord. Now he hears from the Lord. Verse 7 continues, behold, this has touched your lips, and your iniquity is taken away, and your sin is forgiven. Good is that. The angel is speaking, but he's delivering the message from one who alone can forgive. The angel can't forgive. Angels are very limited. They run errands. They are ministering spirits. They are God's emissaries, innumerable number of them. If we could see them, we would be thrilled all over again with their presence. There's an old song that reveals, however, what they are unable to enter into. The song's chorus says, holy, holy, holy is what the angels sing. And I expect to make the courts of heaven ring. But when I sing redemption's story, they will fold their wings, for angels never felt the joy that my salvation brings. Even angels have limitations. And we on this earth can know the joy of salvation that causes an angel to lean over and peer intently at us in our worship. May that happen often during your preseason years. Your sin is forgiven. And then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? Isn't that a great question? I mean, there's only one in the room. The Lord has a way of making things pretty obvious, doesn't he? I remember when I had my heart scare back in 2000. I had gotten up early that morning and experienced some sensation in my jaw, and was at the grocery store getting some things for us that day, and came home and said to Cynthia, I've got a funny feeling, had no chest pain, but I had a funny feeling in my neck and kind of ran down the underside of my arm, and she was out of that bed like lightning. And before I knew it, we were on our way to Presbyterian Hospital, and they went through all the process and said, well, you've got a little blockage in one of the arteries. And we're gonna put a stent in there. So I'm in there in this room, and they start digging in my groin, and then they shove that thing up in there, and boy, that's fun. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, and they said, if you want to watch, it's on television. So I'm watching this thing going up into somebody's heart, and he says, there, that's it. I said, is that me? And he goes, there's nobody else in the room, is there? Whom shall I send? Who will go for us? It's just you and me, Lord. He calls us individually. He doesn't even call us alongside a twin that we may be a part of. No one else in our class has been called just exactly as you have been called. You're unique. You're the only one. You're the only one in the room. Don't ever forget that. Because when you do, you will be envious over those more greatly gifted. You will be competitive and jealous and even more discouraged because you can't preach like that person preaches, or you haven't those gifts that she has. And if the comparison thing is a pile of nonsense, it'll mess you up in the ministry. So stay out of that camp. Whom shall I send? Who will go? So having heard from the Lord, he responds to the Lord. Here am I. Unclean lips and all, send me. If you're up to it, I'm available. Months will pass, and before long, the chapel will be half empty. It's always full at the first because it's exciting and fun, and then it gets dull and boring for some, and then more and more say, well, I've got to get this test, I got to get ready, and before long, it'll dwindle, and the excitement wanes, and classes aren't what they seemed they were at the start, and this prof isn't quite as exciting as you had thought he would be when you read about him in the catalog. And the course includes a lot of quizzes that you hadn't planned on, and demands and reading, and before you know it, there's an injury in preseason. And you get an attitude. Strange how attitudes at seminary go with you through ministry. So guard against that, okay? There's nothing attractive about cynicism. I meet up with it regularly among men and women in ministry. It's a tragedy on parade. Perfunctory spirit. Business as usual. Another communion service, another wedding, another sermon, another illustration. And you forget the epical moment when you said, here am I, send me. You're in a dangerous place. It won't stop being dangerous when winter comes or spring blooms, or you receive your degree. It'll just intensify. But you're learning now how to handle these dangerous times. Young Presbyterian pastor named Robert Murray McShane had a friend named Daniel Edwards who was leaving for Germany to train himself in the language and then to enter missionary service. McShane wrote Edwards, "My dear friend, I trust you will have a pleasant and profitable time in Germany. I know you will apply hard to German, but do not forget the culture of the inner man. I mean of the heart. How diligently the cavalry officer keeps his saber clean and sharp. Every stain he rubs off with the greatest care. Remember, you are God's sword, his instrument. I trust a chosen vessel to bear his name. In great measure, according to the purity of the instrument, will be the success. It is not great talents God blesses so much as great likeness to Jesus. A holy minister is an awful weapon in the hand of God." Let's bow together. At the beginning of this fall semester in the year 2008, you're living days you'll never live again. You're going through experiences that may be unique, never to be repeated. May God give you the wisdom and patience to learn from much that is not in any textbook except the Bible. Oh God, set us apart unto the majesty of your name. Guard us from handling the Bible as if it were another of the books in our libraries. Keep us on tiptoe as we anticipate from one day to the next what you're going to teach us and how we're going to use it, and what a significant role that will play in our lifetime of ministry. Guard us from the pride of learning, from the discouragement of testing. Guard us, Father, from a competitive spirit with other classmates. Hold us close to yourself and remind us often, we have said, "Here am I, send me." In the majestic name of Jesus, we all pray. Everybody said.